My name is Sandy Krasner, and I work at the Jet Propulsion Lab. That's the NASA center that builds most of the interplanetary spacecraft. I've been working on interplanetary projects for 40 years, and my job is mainly I make sure that all the computer systems on the spacecraft and the ground all talk to each other. So it's all the information flow, bits moving around, all that type of thing. I've worked on missions from every planet from Mercury to Saturn and a few comets and asteroids. And JPL is kind of the only place in the world where you can do that. I got interested in space as a kid in second grade. I was a real active kid, and the teacher promised if I sat still, for long enough, she'd give me a choice of books, and one of them was a nature book, and the other was a book on man in space. So I've been a space cadet ever since second grade, ever since I was 7 years old. I just came off of the InSight Mars lander, so that was really exciting, particularly landing day. We're just coming in. Things are going fine, but I'm still realizing we could still crash. Something could still happen, and it's really tense.
Ground stations are observing signals consistent with parachute deploy.
Marco Alpha, Marco Bravo, maintain lock status.
Altitude convergence, the radar has locked on the ground.
Yes.
Standing by for lander separation. Lander separation commanded. Altitude 600 meters. Altitude 400 meters. 200 meters. 80 meters. 60 meters. 30 meters. 20 meters, 17 meters, standing by for touchdown.
And then finally we get the signal that we landed safely, and everybody just goes berserk.
Confirmed.
Really fun. 5 minutes after we landed, we got a picture of the area where we're going to be putting our instruments down. And as soon as the picture went up on the screen, all the scientists were up there saying, all right, here's a rock, here's where we're going to put this instrument, here's how we're going to, and they were immediately just jumping into the right mission and figuring out where we're going to put the instruments to start collecting data. We've sent spacecraft to orbit around Mars, and we've done a lot of studying of what Mars's atmosphere is like, and also studying what Venus's atmosphere is like. Venus actually looks like it's a runaway greenhouse effect. So that probably won't happen on Earth, but by studying Venus, by studying Mars, we've got a much better understanding of how atmospheric science works, and a lot of that applies to better understanding how the Earth's atmosphere is working. So all of that sort of applies to understanding how climate change will work. I'd been wanting to get involved in climate change in some way because I knew that was a big, important issue. And it turned out that the guy who's the head of our Citizens Climate Lobby chapter, Rob Haw, I had been working with him at JPL on a mission proposal to put a radar in orbit around Venus. I went to hear a talk he gave, and it seems like a good group to get involved with. When I started learning about the carbon fee and dividend program, that seemed to make the most sense to me. So that's why I got involved with CCL. I'm not an economist, but my understanding is what the economists say is the best way to control carbon emissions and to reduce carbon emissions is to start by putting a price on carbon emissions. And so the particular program, the carbon fee and dividend program that Citizens Climate Lobby has been supporting, and that's now in the Energy Innovations and Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, does precisely that. It puts a price on carbon and starts increasing the price of that. And the important part of that is it starts to put renewable energy on a level playing field. It means that we're actually going to have to start paying for the effects of the carbon dioxide that we're emitting. So I've become real involved in Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL, and it's been real active. A couple of things I like about it. One of them is the people you meet are very interesting. We have a lot of JPL scientists there. We have a lot of people who are politically active and a lot of other things. And this is a whole range of people I haven't worked with before. The other thing is there's lots of things you can do in CCL to get involved and make a difference. I do a lot of what we call tabling. It means we go out and we set up a table at a farmer's market or some other activity, and we talk to people about climate change, and we talk to people about the carbon fee and dividend proposal or the Energy Innovation Act. And I think a lot of it gets people involved. It gets some people who hadn't thought about this that much to understand the issue. I get a fair number of people who coming up and saying, I'm really worried, but it's hopeless. We're lost. And one of the things like we can do is tell people it's not hopeless. We're not lost. There are things we can do. And the particular thing that we're focusing on is lobbying Congress for this energy innovation bill. One of the other things that the Citizens Climate Lobby does a couple of times a year is they run what they call a Congressional Education Day, where people go up to Capitol Hill and meet with every single one of the congressional representatives. I did this a couple of years ago, and over the course of one day, we met with 6 different representative staffs, and it's fascinating. You just go in and talk to people about, are you concerned about climate change? Are you aware of this proposal? That type of thing. I've met with our congressional representative a couple of times. One of the things that CCL tries to do is they're trying to make this a bipartisan program so that they're both Democrats and Republicans heavily involved. One of our volunteers started a group in the House of Representatives called the Climate Solutions Caucus. It was what they called a Noah's Ark caucus. They came in one Democrat, and one Republican. Before the midterms, there were 45 Democrats and 45 Republicans. It was the first 2 members were 2 representatives from South Florida who realized that pretty soon their districts were going to be underwater, and they thought maybe they ought to do something about that. When we did this Congressional Education Day, one of the representatives we went to talk with is a pretty conservative representative named Ken Calvert in Riverside County. We talked with one of his staff members. He wasn't particularly concerned about climate change, but the representative was very concerned about clean air and pollution and diesel emissions. And part of what we talked to him about is, in addition to cleaning up carbon dioxide emissions, when you start reducing fossil fuels, you'll start reducing the mercury that comes out of burning coal and all the byproducts that come out of burning oil and digging oil out of the ground and that type of thing. So CCL has been really strong on personal contacts with members of Congress and with the general public, and on making sure people understand this is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. It's a people issue, and everybody needs to get involved.
Yeah, I'm George Shea, and I'm a writer, primarily, I suppose, a playwright. I had a play done at Williamstown about my screwy Irish Catholic adolescence. Yeah, I wrote a play about another scientist, an obscure scientist, Chester Carlson, who invented the Xerox machine. Boy, I've had a very eclectic history, you might say. I've written a lot of children's books. I wrote a book about Rachel Carson, as a matter of fact. A lot of magazine pieces, and as a matter of fact, I was writing a magazine piece. I was doing an interview with Kurt Vonnegut in 88. What am I talking about? And it was okay. I thought because I'd read his books and I thought we'd have a great time, and it was okay. It wasn't a great interview, But at the end of it, he started talking about, what's the use of going on about this? And of course, he's coughing and wheezing and with the Pell-Mells. And, we're all going to run out of oxygen. The planet's doomed. What's the use? I said, what do you mean? And he told me, he was the first person who explained global warming to me, because earlier that year, Jim Hansen had announced that global warming has begun to a Senate committee. He scared the hell out of me. I think people should be out protesting as much as possible. I think there's a very important election coming up in 2020. I was arrested outside the White House protesting the Keystone XL pipeline. Yeah. 2011. You know, I knocked down some cops, and finally they clubbed me to the ground. It was quite a struggle. And mostly what I've done for the past 8 years is work on Dr. Keeling's curve. Why is Charles David Keeling such an important figure? Dave Keeling, he always called himself Dave. Because in the mid-1950s, Keeling was 27 years old. He was at Caltech. He was a postdoc at Caltech. And all by himself, he figured out a way to measure carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It was terribly simple. He actually discovered that there's one CO2 number for the entire planet. The same air wafts across the oceans and visits every part of the Earth. We did the Keeling show at Caltech on Earth Day in 2014, and I got friendly with Rob. And one day he said, "Gee, why don't you come to some CCL meetings?" And so my wife and I, we went to CCL meetings in Pasadena for about 3 or 4 years. And we're doing it out here in the Valley now. CCL stands for the Citizens Climate Lobby. And what do they do? It's a single focus organization, unlike a lot of others. What do they want? They want what they call a carbon fee and dividend, all right? So the idea is to start out, I think it's $15 a ton, which doesn't seem like much, and gradually raise it. And with the revenue collected going not to the government, but directly back to the taxpayers. And it all seems like a very reasonable idea. CCL strongly believes in bipartisanship. They know they're not going to get a bill through Congress if we don't have some Republican votes for it. I think, as in any other situation, if you really want to set up a rapport with people, talk about what concerns them, you know, find some common ground. And earlier today, I know I heard some talk about the health effects of all the particles in the air. And frankly, if we pushed the health problem, that might really be a way to go. People can respond to that. And the military has been very lined up on the climate change thing. They realized how it's going to create hundreds of millions of refugees. And where will these people find welcome? And right? How is the military supposed to deal with that?